This is the story of Black Millionaire pretend to be poor to find love for his triplets. Their only help was their real mom as it truly unfolded. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street, each drop echoing like accusations in the silence. Marcus Williams sat on a second-hand couch that had seen better decades, watching his 3-year-old triplets, Zoe, Maya, and Kai, play with toys he'd bought from the dollar store. Their laughter should have filled him with joy, but tonight it only deepened the hollow ache in his chest. 6 months ago, Marcus had been worth $47 million. Tonight, he was pretending to survive on food stamps. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who owned 3 luxury car dealerships across Atlanta, who had a penthouse overlooking the city skyline, who could buy anything his children desired, was now living a lie so elaborate it consumed every waking moment. But desperation makes philosophers of us all, and Marcus had learned something that money couldn't teach. Authentic love was rarer than diamonds and twice as fragile. If you've ever wondered how far a parent would go to secure their children's future happiness, stay with me, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about love, sacrifice, and the price of truth. The deception had started innocently enough. After his wife Camille died in a car accident 2 years prior, Marcus had thrown himself into work, building his empire while his children were raised by a rotating cast of nannies. But as the triplets grew, he noticed something troubling. Every woman who entered their lives seemed more interested in his bank account than in bedtime stories. The final straw came when he overheard his then-girlfriend Stephanie on the phone, laughing about how she'd hit the jackpot and planning to secure the bag by getting pregnant. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He researched the poorest neighborhood in Atlanta, found this apartment, and created an entire false identity. Marcus Johnson, single father, struggling mechanic, living paycheck to paycheck. He opened a checking account with $300, got a job at Tony's Auto Repair for $12 an hour, and began the most elaborate performance of his life. The triplets adapted with the resilience that only children possess. They thought Daddy was playing an extended game of let's pretend, and they embraced their new adventure with innocent enthusiasm. Zoe, the natural leader, appointed herself the family's chief optimist. Maya, quiet and observant, seemed to understand more than she let on. Kai, the youngest by 7 minutes, found magic in the simplest things. A cardboard box became a spaceship, a broken toy became a treasure. But tonight, as Marcus watched them share a single apple because it was all he'd allowed himself to buy, the weight of his deception felt crushing. The apartment's heater had broken 3 days ago, and he'd been too committed to his role to fix it immediately. His children were cold, and he was a millionaire, letting them suffer for the sake of an experiment in authenticity. "And Daddy," Zoe whispered, crawling onto his lap with her worn teddy bear, "are you sad again?" Marcus forced a smile, but 3-year-olds are remarkably perceptive. "Just thinking, baby girl, about Mommy." The question hit like a physical blow. Camille, beautiful, genuine Camille, who had loved him when he was just starting out, when his biggest asset was a dream and a beat-up Honda Civic. She would have hated this charade. She would have told him that real love doesn't need to be tested. It simply is. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral of guilt. Marcus wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in scrubs, her hair pulled back in a tired ponytail, holding what appeared to be a casserole dish. She looked exhausted, like she'd just finished a double shift, but there was something in her posture that suggested strength rather than defeat. "Can I help you?" Marcus called through the door. "Hi, I'm Elena Rodriguez. I live in 4B. I heard you have little ones, and I made too much food tonight. Thought you might—" She paused, and Marcus could hear the careful consideration in her voice. "Well, I know how hard it can be." Marcus hesitated. Part of his experiment meant accepting help when it was offered. Poor people couldn't afford pride the way rich people could. But something about this woman's voice made him nervous. There was an intelligence there, a perceptiveness that might see through his carefully constructed facade. He opened the door. Elena Rodriguez was beautiful in the way that real people are beautiful, not magazine perfect, but alive with character and compassion. Her dark eyes took in the scene behind him. 3 toddlers in mismatched pajamas, a cold apartment, a father who looked like he was drowning in responsibilities he couldn't handle. "I hope you don't mind," she said, offering the dish. "I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Health Care, and I see a lot of single parents struggling. Sometimes we all need a little help." The triplets had noticed the visitor and were peeking around Marcus's legs with curious eyes. Eleanor crouched down to their level, her smile transforming her tired face into something radiant. "And who are these beautiful babies?" "I'm Zoe," his daughter announced proudly. "That's Maya, and that's Kai. We're triplets, which means we're all the same age but different people." Elena laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Triplets? Wow! Your daddy must be the strongest man in the world." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This woman wasn't looking at him with pity or calculation. She was looking at him with recognition, one parent acknowledging another's struggle. "Thank you," he said, accepting the dish. "I'm Marcus Johnson. Elena, and really, it's no trouble. I know how it is." As she turned to leave, Kai's small voice stopped her. "Are you a princess?" Elena turned back, her eyes twinkling. "Why would you think that? Because you're pretty and you're nice, and you brought us food like in the fairy tales." The moment stretched between them, filled with something Marcus couldn't quite name. Elena's cheeks flushed slightly, and she glanced at Marcus with an expression that made his heart skip. "Well," she said softly, "I'm just a regular person who believes in taking care of each other." After she left, Marcus stood in his doorway longer than necessary, watching her disappear into the stairwell. The casserole was still warm in his hands, and for the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel quite so cold. Over the following weeks, Elena became a gentle constant in their lives. She would stop by after her shifts, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just checking in. She never stayed long, never imposed, but her presence began to feel essential. She helped Zoe with a scraped knee, taught Maya a song in Spanish, and listened with infinite patience as Kai explained his elaborate theories about why dinosaurs were actually just very big dogs. Marcus found himself looking forward to her visits with an intensity that surprised him. Elena treated him like an equal, never with the condescension he'd expected from someone who clearly had her life more together than his supposed circumstances suggested. She talked to him about books, about dreams, about the small philosophies that emerge from everyday struggles. "You're different," she told him one evening as they sat on the building's fire escape while the triplets napped inside. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "Different how? Most people in situations like yours, like ours, they get bitter or they get desperate. But you, there's something peaceful about you, like you know something the rest of us don't." Marcus felt the familiar stab of guilt. If only she knew what he really knew, that none of this struggle was real for him, that he could end it with a single phone call. "Maybe I just learned that fighting against what you can't control is a waste of energy," he said, which was true, even if his circumstances weren't. Elena nodded thoughtfully. "My ex-husband never understood that. He thought poverty was a moral failing, like we weren't trying hard enough. He left when things got really bad." "His loss," Marcus said, and meant it. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You know what I love about you, Marcus. You see people, really see them. That's rare." The irony was devastating. Here was this incredible woman, praising him for his authenticity, while he lived the most elaborate lie of his life. But as the weeks passed, Marcus began to realize something that terrified him. His feelings for Eleanor were the most real thing he'd experienced since Camille's death. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening in November. Marcus had just returned from his shift at Tony's, a job that had become surprisingly meaningful to him, when he found Elena in the hallway outside his apartment, crying. "Elena? What's wrong?" She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just got some news and I didn't know where else to go." Marcus didn't hesitate. He unlocked his door and guided her inside. The triplets were at their neighbor Mrs. Patterson's apartment, an arrangement that had become routine on evenings when Marcus worked late. "Talk to me," he said, settling beside her on the couch. "It's my student loans," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got a letter today. They're garnishing my wages. I'm going to lose the apartment." Marcus felt his heart clench. "How much do you owe?" $87,000. "I know it sounds impossible, but medical school, then nursing school, then my mom got sick and I had to help with her care." She laughed bitterly. "And I became a nurse to help people, and now I can't even help myself." Every instinct in Marcus's body screamed at him to fix this. $87,000 was nothing to him, less than he spent on wine in a year. He could write a check right now and change her entire life, but he couldn't, not without destroying everything they'd built together. "There has to be something we can do," he said instead. "Some kind of payment plan or—" "I've tried everything," Elena interrupted. "I've been trying for 3 years. The system doesn't care about good intentions." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her despair filling the small apartment. Finally, Elena spoke again. "You know what the worst part is? I'm falling in love with someone I'm about to disappoint." Marcus's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Elena turned to face him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm falling in love with you, Marcus. With you and with Zoe and Maya and Kai. You've become my family, and now I have to leave because I can't afford to stay." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither dared to cross. Marcus felt the weight of his deception crushing down on him. This woman, this beautiful, genuine, selfless woman, was pouring her heart out to him, and he was living a lie that made any honest response impossible. "Elena," he began, but she held up a hand. "You don't have to say anything. I know this complicates things. I know you have your own struggles, your own responsibilities. I needed you to know, before I disappear from your life. What would you do in this moment, when the person you love is suffering, and you have the power to save them, but using that power would destroy the very foundation of your relationship?" Marcus made a choice that would haunt him for weeks to come. He kissed her. It was soft and desperate, and filled with all the words he couldn't say. Elena responded with a passion that spoke of months of suppressed longing, and for a moment, the apartment filled with something that felt like hope. When they broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," Marcus whispered, and it was the truest thing he'd said in months. But love built on lies is a house built on sand, and Marcus was about to learn that lesson in the cruelest way possible. The next morning, Elena was gone. Not just from his apartment, but from the building entirely. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who watched the triplets, told him that Elena had left before dawn with 2 suitcases and a broken expression. She asked me to give you this," Mrs. Patterson said, handing him a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter that would shatter Marcus's carefully constructed world. "Marcus, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've taken a job in Phoenix, a fresh start, where my past can't follow me. I want you to know that these past few months have been the happiest of my life. You and the children gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope, but I can't stay and watch you struggle while I add to your burdens. You deserve someone who can be a partner, not another responsibility. You deserve someone who can help you give those beautiful children the life they deserve. Take care of yourself, Marcus. Take care of them. And please, don't try to find me. Some love stories don't get happy endings, and that's okay. What we had was real, even if it was brief. Love always, Elena. P.S. There's something I never told you. The night we met, I was coming home from the worst day of my career. I'd lost a patient, a little boy not much older than your triplets. I was questioning everything, wondering if I was strong enough to keep going. Then I saw you with your children, saw the way you loved them despite having so little to give, and I remembered why I became a nurse in the first place. You saved me before I ever saved you." Marcus read the letter 3 times before the full impact hit him. Elena was gone, and it was his fault. His elaborate deception, designed to find authentic love, had driven away the most authentic person he'd ever met. The triplets took the news as only children can, with heartbreaking acceptance and endless questions. "Is Elena coming back?" Zoe asked every morning for 2 weeks. "Did we do something wrong?" Maya whispered one night, her small face creased with worry. "I miss the princess," Kai announced regularly, as if saying it enough times might make her reappear. Marcus tried to explain in terms they could understand. But how do you tell 3-year-olds that sometimes adults make choices that hurt everyone involved? How do you explain that love isn't always enough? The apartment felt hollow without Elena's presence. Marcus found himself staring at the fire escape where they'd shared so many conversations, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. The irony was suffocating. He'd created this elaborate test to find someone who would love him for who he really was. And when he found her, his deception made it impossible for her to stay. 3 weeks after Elena left, Marcus made a decision that would change everything again. He was going to tell her the truth. He hired a private investigator to find her in Phoenix, spent sleepless nights crafting the perfect explanation, and prepared to lay his heart bare. But when he finally tracked her down, what he discovered made him question everything he thought he knew about love, sacrifice, and the nature of truth itself. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just a pediatric nurse struggling with student loans. Elena Rodriguez was Dr. Elena Rodriguez Chen, one of the most respected pediatric surgeons in the country, and she was worth approximately $12 million. The private investigator's report felt like a punch to the gut. Dr. Rodriguez Chen had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Medical School, completed her residency at Johns Hopkins, and had been recruited by Phoenix Children's Hospital with a signing bonus that exceeded most people's annual salaries. The scrubs she wore were designer. The tired appearance was the result of choosing to work in underserved communities, despite having offers from the most prestigious hospitals in the world. And the student loans, they belonged to her younger brother, who she'd been secretly supporting through medical school, while he believed the money came from scholarships. Marcus stared at the photographs of Elena in her real life, confident, successful, surrounded by colleagues who clearly respected her immensely. She looked like a different person, and yet somehow exactly the same. The kindness was still there, the intelligence, the quiet strength. But now he understood why she'd seemed so comfortable with struggle, so unimpressed by his supposed poverty. She'd been pretending too. The realization hit him like a physical blow. While he'd been playing poor to test her authenticity, she'd been playing poor to test his. 2 millionaires, pretending to be broke, falling in love with each other's lies. But there was more. The investigator had uncovered something else, something that made Marcus's blood run cold. Elena hadn't just chosen that apartment building randomly. She'd been watching him for months. The report included surveillance photos dating back to before they'd officially met. Elena outside his real penthouse. Elena at one of his car dealerships. Elena at Camille's grave on the anniversary of her death, standing far enough away to observe but not intrude. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Had their entire relationship been a setup? Had Elena been running some kind of long con, targeting him for his wealth while pretending to be poor herself? But then he remembered her letter, the genuine pain in her voice when she'd confessed her feelings, the way she'd looked at his children with such authentic love. None of that could have been fake, could it? The questions consumed him for days. He barely slept, barely ate, and the triplets began to notice their father's distress. "Daddy's sad again," he heard Maya whisper to her siblings one morning. "Maybe we should call Elena," Zoe suggested with the simple logic of a 3-year-old. "She's not coming back," Kai said matter-of-factly. Daddy made her go away. The accusation, delivered with childish honesty, cut deeper than any adult criticism could have, because Kai was right. Marcus's deception had driven Elena away, and now his children were paying the price. That night, Marcus made another decision. He was going to Phoenix, and he was going to get answers. But first, he had to do something he should have done months ago. He had to tell his children the truth. "Zoe, Maya, Kai," he said, gathering them on the couch the next morning. "Or Daddy needs to tell you something important." 3 pairs of bright eyes looked up at him expectantly. "Remember how we've been playing this game of pretending? Pretending to live in this apartment, pretending Daddy doesn't have much money." They nodded solemnly. "Well, it wasn't really a game. Daddy was testing something. And I think I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Zoe asked, her voice small. "I think I hurt Elena's feelings, and I think that's why she went away." The triplets exchanged glances with the telepathic communication that only siblings share. "Are you going to fix it?" Maya asked. "I'm going to try," Marcus promised. "But it might mean some big changes. Are you okay with that?" "Will Elena come back?" Kai asked hopefully. "I don't know, buddy, but I'm going to do everything I can to make things right." 2 days later, Marcus stood outside Phoenix Children's Hospital, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. He'd left the triplets with his mother in Atlanta, finally revealing the truth about his elaborate deception. She'd been horrified, supportive, and ultimately understanding, the complex reaction of a parent watching their child learn difficult lessons about love and honesty. The hospital was impressive, all glass and steel and cutting-edge technology. Marcus felt underdressed in his jeans and button-down shirt, but he'd left his designer suits behind months ago, and somehow it felt wrong to put them back on now. Finding Eleanor was easier than he'd expected. Dr. Rodriguez Chen was legendary at the hospital, and everyone knew where to find her. Marcus followed the directions to the pediatric surgery wing, his palms sweating with each step. He found her in a consultation room, speaking with a family whose child was scheduled for surgery. Through the glass window, Marcus could see her in her element, confident, compassionate, completely in control. She wore surgical scrubs, but these were clearly high quality, and her hair was styled in a way that spoke of professional success rather than exhausted struggle. When she finished with the family and stepped into the hallway, their eyes met across the corridor. Elena's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, pain, and something that might have been hope. "Marcus," she said, approaching him slowly, "what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said simply. Elena glanced around the busy hallway, then nodded toward an empty conference room. "In here." They sat across from each other at a polished table that probably cost more than the rent on their fake apartment. The silence stretched between them, filled with months of deception and genuine feeling. "I know," Marcus said finally. "Know what? I know who you really are. Elena. Dr. Elena Rodriguez Chen. $12 million. Harvard Medical School. The whole thing." Elena's face went pale, but she didn't deny it. "How did you find out?" "The same way you found out about me, I imagine. Private investigator." Elena's eyes widened. "You know about that too. I know you were watching me before we met. I know you chose that apartment building specifically. What I don't know is why." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I loved your wife." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "What?" "Not romantically," Eleanor said quickly. "Camille was my patient 3 years ago, before the accident. She came to me with chest pains, and I diagnosed her with a rare heart condition. I operated on her, and she survived. We became friends. She talked about you constantly, about how much she loved you, how proud she was of your success, how worried she was that people only saw your money instead of your heart." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. "Camille never mentioned. She asked me not to tell you. She said you had enough to worry about without adding her health scare to the list. But we stayed in touch. She would send me pictures of the triplets, updates about your business, stories about your life together. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. When she died, I felt like I'd lost a sister. I went to the funeral, stayed in the back. I watched you with those babies, saw how lost you looked, and I wanted to help, but I didn't know how to approach you without explaining our connection. So you started watching me. I started checking on you, Elena corrected, from a distance. I told myself I was honoring Camille's memory by making sure you and the children were okay. But then you disappeared from your penthouse, and I got worried. It took me weeks to track you down to that apartment building. Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. And you moved in. I moved in, Elena confirmed. But I didn't plan to get involved. I was just going to observe, make sure you were safe, and then fade back into the background. But then you knocked on my door with a casserole. Elena smiled through her tears. You looked so overwhelmed, and the children were so beautiful. And I thought, maybe I could help, just a little. Just until you got back on your feet. But you didn't know I was pretending to be poor. No, Elena said. I thought you'd lost everything. I thought you were genuinely struggling. And I fell in love with the man I thought you'd become. Humble, present, focused on what really mattered. Marcus felt a laugh escape his chest, though nothing about this situation was funny. While I fell in love with the woman I thought you were, genuine, unpretentious, real, we're quite a pair, aren't we? Eleanor said sadly. They sat in silence again, the weight of their mutual deception settling between them like a wall. Why did you really leave? Marcus asked finally. Elena looked down at her hands. Because I realized I was falling in love with someone who didn't really exist. The Marcus I knew was a performance, just like the Elena you knew was a performance. And I thought it was better to end it before we hurt each other more. But the student loans, your brother, real, Elena said. When I've been supporting him through medical school, but I've been doing it secretly. He thinks he has scholarships. I didn't want him to feel indebted to me the way I felt indebted to the people who helped me when I was starting out. Marcus shook his head in amazement. So you were pretending to be poor while secretly paying for someone else's education, while you were pretending to be poor while secretly owning half of Atlanta. They looked at each other across the table, and suddenly Marcus started laughing. Really laughing, the kind of deep, cathartic laughter that comes after months of tension finally breaks. Elena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. What's so funny? Don't you see, Marcus said, wiping tears from his eyes. We're both idiots. We're both wealthy people who were so afraid of being loved for our money that we pretended to be poor, and we fell in love anyway. Elena's lips twitched with the beginning of a smile. When you put it like that, we tested each other without knowing we were being tested, and we both passed. Eleanor's smile grew wider. We did, didn't we? Marcus reached across the table and took her hands. Eleanor, I need you to know something. Everything I felt for you was real. The man you fell in love with, that's who I really am. The money, the cars, the penthouse, that's just stuff. The person who sat on that fire escape with you, who listened to you talk about your dreams, who fell asleep thinking about your smile, that's the real me. Elena squeezed his hands. And the woman who brought you casseroles and helped with scraped knees and fell in love with your children, that's the real me too. The success, the career, the money, it's all real, but it's not who I am. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, like a weight he'd been carrying for months finally lifting. So where does that leave us? Elena was quiet for a moment, considering. I think it leaves us with a choice. We can let our deception define us, or we can choose to start over with complete honesty. Starting over sounds terrifying, Marcus admitted. It does, Elena agreed. But you know what's more terrifying? Spending the rest of our lives wondering what might have been. Marcus stood up and walked around the table, pulling Eleanor to her feet. Doctor, Elena Rodriguez Chen, would you like to have dinner with me? The real me? Elena smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise after the longest night. I would love to, Mr. Marcus Williams. But I have one condition. Name it. I want to meet your children again as myself this time." Marcus felt his heart swell with something that felt like pure joy. "They've been asking about you every day since you left, and I've been thinking about them every day since I left." They stood there in the conference room, holding hands and grinning at each other like teenagers, when Elena's pager buzzed. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. "Emergency surgery." "Go," Marcus said. "Save lives. Be amazing." Elena paused at the door. "Marcus, when you go back to Atlanta, will you tell them I'm coming home?" "Are you?" Elena looked back at him with eyes full of love and possibility. "I'm exactly where I belong. I just need to finish some things here first." Marcus watched her disappear down the hallway, her confident stride carrying her toward whatever medical emergency awaited. This was Elena in her element, and she was magnificent. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in his real apartment, the penthouse he'd abandoned months ago, preparing for Elena's arrival. The triplets were practically vibrating with excitement, having spent the morning helping him cook dinner and arrange flowers. "Is Elena really coming back?" Zoe asked for the 100th time. "And she's really coming back," Marcus confirmed, adjusting a picture frame for the 3rd time. "And she's not going away again," Maya added. "Not if I have anything to say about it." "And she's still a princess?" Kai wanted to know. Marcus smiled, thinking of Elena in her surgical scrubs, commanding a team of doctors with quiet authority. "She's definitely still a princess, buddy." The doorbell rang, and 3 small bodies launched themselves toward the door. Marcus took a deep breath, straightened his shirt, and opened the door to his future. Elena stood in the hallway, and she looked like herself, really herself, for the first time since he'd known her. She wore a simple dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but her smile was the same one that had lit up their dingy apartment all those months ago. "Elena!" the triplets chorused, wrapping themselves around her legs. "My beautiful babies," Elena said, crouching down to their level. "I missed you so much." "We missed you too," Zoe said solemnly. "Daddy was sad without you, but he's happy now," Maya added, looking back at Marcus with knowing eyes. "Are you going to stay this time?" Kai asked, with the directness that only children possess. Elena looked up at Marcus over their heads. "Oh, do if your daddy will have me." Marcus stepped forward, his heart full of love and hope and the kind of happiness he'd thought he'd lost forever. "Elena Rodriguez Chen, will you stay forever and always?" she said, standing to kiss him while 3 small children cheered around them. 6 months later, Marcus and Elena were married in a small ceremony in Marcus's backyard, surrounded by family and friends who had watched their unconventional love story unfold. The triplets served as ring bearers, flower girls, and general chaos coordinators, and their laughter filled the air like music. During their vows, Marcus spoke about the difference between testing love and trusting it, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable, and about the way Elena had taught him that authenticity isn't about what you have or don't have. It's about who you choose to be when no one is watching. Elena spoke about Camille, about the promise she'd made to watch over Marcus and the children, and about how sometimes the universe conspires to bring people together in the most unexpected ways. She talked about the difference between loving someone for who they pretend to be and loving them for who they really are. But the most powerful moment came when Zoe, Maya, and Kai presented Elena with a handmade card that read, "Welcome to our family, Princess Elena. Love, your kids." Because that's what they were now, a family, not perfect, not without complications, but real in a way that money could never buy. As they danced under the stars that night, Elena whispered in Marcus's ear, "Do you think Camille would approve?" Marcus looked over at the triplets, who were spinning in circles on the dance floor, their faces glowing with pure joy. "I think she'd say we finally figured out what she knew all along, which is that love isn't something you test. It's something you trust." Elena smiled and pulled him closer. "I love you, Marcus Williams, all of you, the millionaire and the mechanic and everything in between. I love you too, Dr. Rodriguez Chen, the surgeon and the casserole maker and the woman who sees magic in broken toys." They danced until the children fell asleep in their chairs, until the last guest went home, until it was just the two of them under a sky full of stars, holding each other and marveling at the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them together. Sometimes the best love stories are the ones that begin with deception and end with truth. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find each other. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we discover that the person we were pretending to be was actually who we were meant to become all along. In the end, Marcus learned that you can't manufacture authentic love. You can only create the conditions for it to grow. And Elena learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the courage to be themselves. Their story became legend in their circle of friends, a reminder that love is not about perfection, but about the willingness to be imperfect together. It's about choosing each other not despite your flaws, but because of the way those flaws fit together to create something beautiful. If this story of unexpected love and second chances brought you hope, share it with someone who needs reminding that the best relationships are built not on what we have, but on who we choose to be when everything else is stripped away. The triplets grew up knowing they were loved not just by their father, but by a woman who had chosen them as deliberately as she had chosen him. Eleanor became not just their stepmother, but their champion, their advocate, and their reminder that families are made not just by blood, but by the daily choice to show up for each other. And Marcus learned that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in moments. Moments like watching Elena braid Maya's hair, or seeing her teach Kai to ride a bike, or listening to her read bedtime stories to Zoe in a voice full of love and wonder. Years later, when people asked them for the secret to their happiness, they would smile and say the same thing. We stopped pretending to be someone else and started being ourselves, and we discovered that ourselves were exactly who we were meant to love.